When it comes to bourbons with higher age statements, they're usually highly sought after, and also they're going to cost you a pretty penny, and that's also the case with the two bottles we have in front of us today, Elijah Craig 18-year and Knob Creek 18-year. In this video, I'm going to do a blind review of them both against each other using 5 different criteria that all come together for a 10-point rating scale, which I like to call the lightning counter. Welcome into the Whiskey Weather YouTube channel, everybody. I am Brandon. I'm a meteorologist in Cincinnati, and here it is always whiskey weather. Now, before we get started, I did mention this is a blind bourbon review, and I want to ask you the question of what should be the next blind review I do. Is it a wheated flight? Maybe doing some more higher age statements? Or maybe a couple of ryes? Whatever it is, drop that in the comment section below, and let's jump right into the review. So we've got Elijah Craig 18-year, Knob Creek 18-year. Which one's which? We're about to find out. My coworker Craig poured these up for me. I have no idea which one is which, and that's what I love about blinds, is because it takes away the bias of the label and maybe something that you think you might like just because someone's told you something about it. So I've got number 2 and number 1. There are a little bit of differences and some intricacies between the two. Elijah Craig 18-year, 18 years old, but I believe it comes in at 90 proof, 45% ABV, and it is a single barrel. Knob Creek 18-year comes in at 100 proof, and it's not a single barrel, it is a small batch, or a batch of some size. Whether that's small or not, who knows. A couple other differences, the mash bills, but those are actually really close. Elijah Craig, of course, 78% corn, 10% rye, and 12% malted barley, while Knob Creek, I've seen a couple different reports of what is what, but some say 77% corn, 13% rye, and 10% malted barley. Others say 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malted barley. Very small difference, and honestly, both of those mash bills are still very close to what the Elijah Craig is. I poured the samples. As I mentioned, we're going to do this on that lightning counter rating scale, which starts with the nose, then goes to flavor, finish, mouthfeel, and then finally the value. Here's the thing about these two bottles. They're both pretty close in price. Elijah Craig, the MSRP is $149.99. More likely you're going to find it between $180 and $200, if not slightly higher on the secondary market. Knob Creek 18 has an MSRP of $169.99. Probably going to find it around the same price, between $170 and $200. So the value of both of these are going to be about the same, at least when we're rating and how much they cost. So when I do the value and judge the value, I'm going to just judge it on $200 a piece. So let's jump right into it. The nose on number 1, ooh, very sweet. The oak comes through, and that's one thing you're going to notice on the 18-year-old bourbons. They've been in oak a while. It's gonna taste like oak and smell like oak, Brandon, thank you. So, some cherry. There's a little bit of a nut, which would make me think it's Knob Creek, but on the nose, very delicious. Almost like a baked good of some sort. I'm thinking like a pie, like a Boston cream pie on the nose. A little bit of oats, like a cherry and oats coming through. The nose on number 1, very good. I'm going to say a 1.7 out of 2. As for the nose on number 2, it's a little more muted. It's got a little bit more of a must to it. Not as strong. There's not as much of a nuttiness to either one of these as I would have expected. This is good. There's some slight cherry as well. They're very similar. This has a little more ethanol on it, but it doesn't blow you away. This is a sweeter nose. Of the two, I think 2 has a little more oak. It's a little more bitter, 1.6. So very close when it comes to the nose on the rating scale. So the next part is, what do they taste like, the flavor? Of course, that's what everybody wants to know. Okay. It's a little more nutty, and it's dull. It's got a little bit of sweetness up front, then it starts to go away. That was the first sip. Let's see what we got on number 2. It's a little more tannic in my mind. You can taste the bitter oak out of that a little more. There's oakiness to it. There's sweetness. There's a little bit of that peanut, which would make me lean towards this being Knob Creek. But again, don't know. I'm going to say the flavor on that, I would wish for more, especially for a bottle that I'm looking to be spending a little bit higher price on. We're going to go with a 1.2 on the flavor on number 1. As for number 2, it was definitely pretty sweet. It's also a little more watery, which I would expect this to be Elijah Craig the single barrel, because it's a 90 proof whiskey, and this is a little thinner, a little less viscous in my mind. Of course, that was number 1. That was sip number 1. There's more of that vanilla, that caramel. The oak is definitely present, and it's drying on the back end of this. It's talking to me quite a bit. Very good. I'm going to go with a 1.3. So we've got 1.2 and 1.3 on the rating scale. So the next category to judge is the mouthfeel and then the finish. I'm going to do them both at the same time. And on this one, as I mentioned, very good nose. It's a little more bitter. Mouthfeel is very tingly. I will akin it to eating a big red stick of gum. Right, the big red cinnamon gum, very powerful. There's a kick to it, and it's got a little bit of that viscousness. It's creamy. I like the mouthfeel on this one. We're going to go with a 1.4. As for number 2, let's see what we get on the mouthfeel. And I totally skipped past the finish on that one, so we're going to have to go back and drink again. Mouth feels thinner. It does have a little bit of a tingle to it, but it just doesn't feel as voluminous, whatever. This mouthfeel, I'm going to go with a 1.0. I would wish for a little bit more of a syrupy feel. This is a little too thin for me, watery, so to speak. And for that, again, did I say 1.1? I'm going to go with a 1.0. Now, let's move on to the finish. So, off of this whiskey, man, that one's still talking. I'm going to go to the finish on this one first because it's the present one. So the finish on number 2, still talking to me. Oaky, cinnamon, there's some cherry to it. Good, not great. We're going to go with a 1.2. And I should probably start writing these down so I don't forget. All right, as for sample number 1, I don't know, maybe there is a little more flavor. It's the bitterness that comes at me. We're going to go with a 1.3 on the flavor. I changed my mind. Write that down. As for the finish, I don't think it's as lingering as number 2. The finish on this one, it's there, but it kind of fades away. I would not say it falls off a cliff totally, but it's kind of more of a downhill where this one stays, if not crescendos upward. So I'm going to go with a finish 1.0 on number 1. As for the value of these two, I think that the value is probably a little bit better for number 1 than it is number 2. When I look at the two of them, the mouthfeel, the finish is really good on number 2. I'm going to go with a 1.2 on value for both of them. They're both the same price. They're both pretty close. Probably would lean a little more towards 1 once we add this all up. But a 1.2, I would wish for a little bit more out of a barrel that is an 18-year-old bottle or a bottle that is up to $200. So 1.2 for both of them. Let me add it all up. And we have a winner. Can I get a drum roll, please? And coming in first place with a total of 6.6 on the lightning counter, we've got sample number 1. So the number 1 is the better of the two. This does follow right behind it with 6.4, but it did not come out on top. And in this envelope, I have the answers. It is sealed. So let's see what Mr. Craig McKee has for me. Oh, he did a good job. Sample number 1, Knob Creek. Sample number 2, Elijah Craig 18. That really blows my mind because I'm a big fan of Elijah Craig, and I thought that the batch 1 of the Knob Creek 18 year was good, but I didn't think it was great. 6.6, pretty surprised. So Knob Creek 18, if you get a chance to buy it, do that. I know that Jim Beam just dropped it on August 30th at the distillery for an MSRP, I think at $169.99. I'm sure batch 3 will be even better because they have 2 more years of this. But the winner of the 18-year-old battle really blows my mind because I am a huge Elijah Craig homer. I will say the one thing I did notice between the two, I couldn't tell really much of a difference in proof other than the fact that this was a little bit thinner, but there was still a little bit of that punch to it, so it was really hard to decide which one was which. But again, at the end, Knob Creek 18. So as we wrap up this video, a big shout out to the folks over at Heirloom Jerky for sponsoring this video. It's some of the best beef jerky I've ever had. Not saying it just because they sent it to me, but because I almost ate the whole bag. This is the teriyaki. I think that's one of 3 flavors. And you can get 10% off through the link in my bio or the description below. So go check them out. If you did enjoy this video, would love for you to hit that subscribe button below. That's one way to support me. Another way is just sharing this with some of your bourbon-loving friends. And if you want to support even further, you can join the Stormfront, which is my Patreon, as well as my YouTube memberships. You can hit the join button right below if it's easier for that, or the Patreon link below. A big shout out to all my Patreon members. You get access to barrel picks, also some more fun content and behind the scenes. So you can join the Stormfront as we're continuing to try to put out some of the best content out there. If you did enjoy this review, I appreciate you. Hit that like button below, and you're probably going to like these videos of more reviews right here on the top right. So until next time, it is always whiskey weather. Please stay safe and responsible.